Good morning, mathematicians. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we are going to go over and make a resource page of just equation vocabulary and how to solve equations. In Math 1A, most of the work you will be doing is about equations, and so understanding what these equations mean and how they're put together will help you tremendously as you work through this class. So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about what an equation is. You notice that equation has the word equa in it. That is because equations have an equal sign. So if there's an equal sign, it is an equation. Now once we have that, let's go ahead and take a look at what we call each of these symbols within our equation. It's really a mathematical sentence. These all have meaning. So let's go ahead and start with our 3. We'll start from the left and go right. Our 3, in this case, is called a coefficient. So let's go ahead and write coefficient. Now coefficient, means with. Coefficients are numbers with a variable. They are numbers sitting next to a variable. So I'm actually going to write that definition in there so you can remember that. A coefficient is in front of a variable. Now what's important to know here is that 3 is actually being multiplied by the x. This is 3 times x. Mathematicians can be, I guess you would say, a little lazy once in a while. They don't put in that multiplication sign, but it is there. So this 3x actually means 3 times x. And we'll get more into that a little bit later. Now the next thing that we do have in here is we have our variable. Our variable is like the word that it is. It means it varies. It can be different numbers. It can be different letters. A variable can be an M, it could be a Q, it could be a B. And then we plug in values for our variables. So let's go ahead and put in variable. Variable because it varies. And so I'm going to even underline that part of our word. Variables vary. Now the next piece in our equation here is this 4. Now notice we are subtracting 4, or we can see that as a negative 4, either way. For our assignments here, we are going to call this the constant. Constant because it's not going to change. It is our 4. It is constant. When we go to graph it, it is a constant. It remains the same. It is always a 4. Now we are going to kind of maneuver things around, but for equations, we will call this number right here a constant. Now this is also our this is our total. This is our y. We'll talk more about that one later, but for today, we need to know coefficient, variable, and constant. Okay, now once we understand the terminology of our equation, we are actually going to look at how to solve equations. Now, if at any time you need to stop the video and write this down, or if you just want to wait until the end and copy it all, you can do that. Now, when solving equations, there are 3 steps to solving equations. Sometimes we don't have to take all 3 of them, but there are 3, and I want to make sure that you have them all in your notes. Now, when we are solving equations, the goal is to isolate that variable. Isolate means to make it all by itself. So if we look back up at this equation, we want to get x all by itself. That is our goal. That is our purpose in solving equations. Isolate that variable. So the first thing that we're going to do in solving equations is we are going to simplify the equation. Now I'm just going to give you the steps, and then when we go over the actual assignments, I will go over each of these steps in detail. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to simplify the equation, and we are going to undo any grouping symbols. Parentheses, we need to deal with our parentheses, we need to deal with our exponents. We will undo any grouping symbols so that we can take care of all the pieces. The second thing that we were going to do is we are going to make the constant 0. So in order to isolate our variable, we want this to be a 0, because if this is a 0, it goes away. I shouldn't say it goes away. It kind of goes away. It's now a 0, and we're getting closer to having x all by itself. So we want this to be a 0. So that is our goal. How do we turn this -4 into a 0? And the way that we're going to do that is we are going to add the opposite. And like I said, when we get into actually solving equations, I will do this with you. So adding the opposites, I'm going to add 4 to this, because -4 and a +4 make a 0. The third and last step that we have is we are going to make the coefficient 1. Because the cool thing about 1s is we don't have to write them very often. Okay, make the coefficient 1. So when we make the coefficient 1, if we make this 3 into a 1, we no longer have to write it, and therefore we have x all by itself. So those are our 3 steps. So as I go and teach you your first lesson, I will use these steps, and I will use these steps every single time. So if you need to, go ahead and pause the video. I will switch this out for a minute. Make sure that you have this in your notebook. I also will have a poster in the room, and I'll see you in activity 1.